I am Dr. Jose Perez. I started a organization called Rhodes Consulting Group, basically with the um, intent to help entrepreneurs. We've been doing so for the last 7 years. We help entrepreneurs across the United States. Oh, and what we try to do here is make sure that you get tools and resources that will help your business grow and scale to a different direction. Uh, Now, I'm not just an advisor, I'm a business owner. I've been a business owner for quite some time. I have bought businesses, I have sold businesses, I have really good wins. I also have very atrocious losses. So I've been in your shoes many, many times. Scale from 0 to 25 million, from 0 to 300 employees, but also, lost my shirt on a couple of deals. So I've been through it in reality where I'm willing to share with you today the experiences and whatever the case may be. It's a lot of lessons that I have learned and also have endured through pain and misery, as many of you have. And please feel free to engage as much as you can and let me know. Let me just read this quickly. Acquire businesses. Well, that's a new one. We need to put a program on all in acquiring the business. There's a whole entire chapter on that one. All right. So understanding the needs of capital, right? What do you need capital for? That's important. And also, how do you expect to raise it? Are you going to raise it through what we know, which is, how we usually all start, who's a friends and family? Are you going to borrow money from friends and family? Or are you going to go and reach out to a bank, or you're going to reach out to investors, right? Uh, there's a huge difference on all of these, right? Because not all capital is created the same. So we want to make sure that we understand components of capital, right? So if we look at this particular slide, then we look at, different types of capital. One is equity, which is raised capital by selling shares in your business. For the most part, in our space, in our ecosystem, this doesn't really apply unless we're doing technology. Although you could see some folks would say, well, listen, I'll give you X amount of dollars for 20 or 25% of your company. And that allows us to actually have some liquidity that we could do some stuff in, right? Then you have debt, right? And this is when you actually go to the bank and you says, hey, I need a loan. And you can go straight through a bank and get a loan, which could be a first time loan for a business, which usually don't go anywhere above $50,000. The most that I've seen is $50,000 as a private loan for a particular business, unless you're doing an SBA loan that could go all the way up to $10 million. And that's a 7(a) loan that you could do. And that's a little bit, bigger. And that usually is, I have a really good credit score. I really have a great business plan, and I have 10% down of what I'm going to do for the business, right? And then if you start looking at the other category, there's grants. We all love grants. Grants, think about it as money that they give you for a particular intent and purpose. And usually you don't have to pay these. I don't think these grants are going to show up at the rate that they were before, but they will come from time to time in different scales. Okay, so just keep an eye on that. Then you have crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is it's getting a lot more popular nowadays. What crowdfunding is doing, it's allowing us to actually open businesses through particular funding that believe in your business. Sometimes could be angel. Sometimes what they do is they invest in your business and they want it back in some shape of return. So what we could do on that front, for example, it would be something like, hey, I'm willing to donate $200, and when you open up your store, I'll get 225 as a credit, or $250 as a credit, and that allows us to kickstart. All right, matching funding to business stage. So there's a few of you here, right? And kind of all have different needs in regards of funding, right? But what I will tell you is the funding, it's very unique to what you need, right? So for example, I will tell you the first thing, not all banks are created equal, right? And because not all banks are created equal, some banks are very interested in something in regards of lending. So, for example, one bank will say, I just do collateralized based lending, meaning I only will lend you if you have a collateral against it, right? Other banks are willing to say, hey, listen, I'd only lend to these particular NACS codes, and you'll see them, right? Because they basically are saying, I like this industry, I like that industry, I stay away from these industries. So, for example, barbershops usually are not well received by banks, because banks are saying, I'm not sure if I understand the model. I can't really prove the revenue because you just rent the chair, right? So we're having some sort of issues with that. Other banks will tell you, I only lend on real estate. If you don't have real estate connected to this, we're not doing this. Then you have some banks that in essence also say, hey, uh, we are lending for business growth. Like if you have opportunities, right? So there's other particular source of funding that you could apply to. If you also look at this, you need to understand what stages of funding are you willing to enter. So, for example, if you just started your business or will start your business, right? And you're looking for funding, reality is that you're not going to probably get a $500,000 fund or $1 million loan right away, right? Unless you have really great credit, you have an incredible business pitch, that you have some credible experience and whatnot, it's very unlikely, right? So what you need to keep in consideration is, okay, what am I asking? And would I bet this money on someone else if I didn't know them, right? You guys heard of the expression, right? You don't bid on the horse, you bid on the jockey. It's kind of like the same thing here, right? When you go in front of the bank wants to make sure that you did your homework, that you have a great business plan, that you have a great concept, and that no matter what, they could bid on you any day of the week, and then you're still going to make it out of there, right? So understanding that it's important, because based on that, then you can figure it out. Is it, I'm going to go look for personal savings, family and friends? Am I going to do the micro loan, which I could go all the way to $50,000, and then I could do a little bit of crowdfunding and some grants to do some startups, right? Am I going to do bank loans and equity investors, right? Depending on what it is. Or am I going to go in venture capital, right? And venture capital, basically, most of it, and I wouldn't say all of it, but most of it is something so far-fetched, right? That it's very likely to become a unicorn, right? And if you're not familiar with the unicorn expression, it means a company that is going to get us to $1 billion and beyond in revenue, right? So there's not that many VC firms, although they are, right, or PE firms that are looking to invest in construction companies and, in service-based companies that are not related to something that is really going to achieve massive amount of revenue of massive amount of time, and it's going to really yield crazy returns for them. Okay. That is correct. Beauty shops neither. We read this, the capital fund opportunities for. It could be depending on what your franchise is. Just let me know what your franchise is, and then I can kind of tell you a little bit around that. All right. Then you have traditional versus non-traditional funding, right? So traditional funding is basically you go to the bank, you said, Mr. Banker, very nice to see you and meet you today, or Mrs. Banker, right? And here's what I want to do. I want to get a loan for $100,000 or $200,000 because I need to buy more equipment, right? That's one. And then there's other sorts of different funding that it's kind of put out there. Has anybody here hear of a CDF5, Community Development Fund, Financial Institutions, right? Those CDFIs are what we call purpose lending institutions, right? They have an intent and they have a responsibility to put out there funding that is very non-traditional for other banks. Basically, if you can't get funding through a normal bank, a CDF5 is willing to work with you to a certain particular extent. Right now, the reason I say that is because just don't think that you go to a CDF5 and they're going to give you a loan. Right? They are willing to work with you and to have different alternatives to funding. Number one, they're more expensive than regular banks. That is for sure. Right? Number two, they usually do have what we call intentional funding, meaning there's a purpose behind that dollar. It must penetrate Black communities. It must penetrate women-owned business. It must penetrate veteran-owned business, Latino-owned business, whatever the case may be, right? And that funding is set aside for those particular folks, right? Where it becomes really, really great for all of us, and to really penetrate those dollars. However, they still do their underwriting. They still do a good amount of scrutiny on who you are as a person and as a business before they lend you a buck. So don't think because you go to a CDF 5 that you're going to skip the process of underwriting. The underwriting process is roughly the same on all these particular banks or financial institutions. All right. So when you look at that, why is that important, right? Although the requirements are a little bit less than others, right? They still have requirements. The most traditional requirement for a CDF 5, especially if you're a brand new business and you just started and you're going to be asking for a loan, it's a business plan. If you don't have a business plan, right, then you can't get in, right? Usually that's the way it works for CDF 5s. For traditional banks, it's financial documentation, which we'll talk a little bit more further down the line. But if it's your first year in business, you're looking for a loan, you're trying to go to a CDF 5, you want to make sure that you get at least a business plan under your belt that will showcase what you're thinking of doing and how they will be done, right? For the most part, this was going to be one of the main elements, aside of projections and aside of who you are, in order to be able to receive funding. All right. All right. There's two questions here, and I know the franchisee Ray said, okay, a B2B cost reduction consulting company. Brother, I'm going to tell you one thing. Unfortunately, consulting businesses are very hesitant through banks in order to get funding, right? Because they will only take your receivables based on what you have. So your agent report, meaning how much money people owe you, and then they only will let you borrow between 70 to 80% based on that. The main reason behind that is they want to make sure that you have reoccurring revenue. And if you don't have reoccurring revenue, that creates hesitation for them. So there's very few banks that would do this, although they are, right? I have a consultancy firm, as I mentioned, but my consultancy firm, it's basically dedicated to working with government and quasi agencies in order to help small business owners. Therefore, they see those as contracts. But if you have individuals, they will stay a little bit away from them. Also, I will ask that you will stay at least 2 years in business before you approach them because they're going to be hesitant to do that. Okay. How do you know the online lenders are legit? Depends on which ones, right? Because there's a lot of there's a lot of lenders and there's a lot of brokers, and I think you need to understand the difference, right? Not all brokers are lenders. They're just trying to broker the deal to make what we consider points, which is commission based, right? And those points, it's what they will profit from, right? And what happens through there is that they would underwrite the deal, give you the information, but in essence, they're submitting it through a particular bank or sometimes CDF 5 or so in order for you to get you the loan. But it's if you do a search well enough, you should be able to see who your top lenders are. There's also lenders that are recognized by the SBA as approved partners through them, and you'll be able to see what are the lists if you're going to do an SBA loan. You will also recognize who is the number one lender, SBA lender in North Carolina. So you'll be able to see that, and then you will also know who your banks are, who your traditional banks are. I'll tell you a little tip or a little secret, and if there's any bankers in the room, my apologies if this is going to hurt anybody's feelings, right? The smaller the bank, the more appetite they have, right? The smaller the bank, the more appetite they have. Not always, but most of the time, right? So if we go to the Wells Fargos, if we go to the Bank of America, if we go to the Chases, right? They have rigid guidelines when it comes to lending. So they're going to be looking for certain particular niches or expertise that they want to lend to versus the smaller banks usually are a little bit more aggressive. They probably have to get a lot of money out there and lend some money out. So you probably get away with a little bit more than the other banks. Just have that in the back of your mind. Okay. All right. This particular grant here, so we have here grant and government programs, right? As you see, we have some in here, which is the SBIR, the USDA, Minority Business Development Agency, which we're here today, right? And then we have also state and local grants, which is through either Economic Development Council. Sometimes it could be through the Economic Development Consortium. Sometimes it could be through your local government in office that will give out grants and stuff like that. And sometimes it's to the federal government or quasi agencies or nonprofit organizations that offer these particular grants, right? Again, the grant situation was a huge, huge rush that happened during the pandemic and after, right? I personally don't foresee having the huge volume that we had. Most of the programs that we are engaged with today are a component in a mixture of both. You will receive assistance in the matter of resources, right? And then you will receive a stipend or a grant in order to complete the program. But you're not going to see as many as here's 50,000, here's 100,000, good luck with your business, right? I think those days are over. And I hope I'm wrong, but at the end of the day, I think they have slowed down a ton. You will still see many of them on Hello Alice. You'll see many of them on other organizations, but they have pivoted a lot, right? All right. Here's a deck that, for the most part, most of us fall a little short on, right? All right. So here's the important slide, right? If you go to the bank, you're going to need, at a very minimum, these docs, right? And these docs will change. So you need a profit and loss statement, right? And you need a profit and loss statement that is done year to date, as well as the year that just closed. So most of us, if you are for profit, most of us, not all of us, will run calendar year from January 1st to December 31st, right? They want to see that. And for the most part, they'll try to ask you for 2 years of taxes, if not three, right? But in here, you're going to need as minimum as a clear profit and loss statement, a solid balance sheet, right? A balance sheet is important because it tells you what sort of liabilities, assets you have in there, and a cash flow forecast. Most of us do not operate under cash flow forecast. I know that there was someone here that just made the question, and you put it and you said DoD contract. If you have an expectancy to receive a DoD contract and you know the impact of that contract to your business is going to be $200,000-300,000 of new revenue, $1 million of new revenue, right? We need to make an argument through cash flow modeling how much money you're going to need in order to survive and sustain that contract, right? That you would do it in a cash flow forecast. Also, budget projections, same particular thing in here, right? Budget projections are important. What would you do for the year? Are you going to grow? Are you going into right directions? Are you actually shrinking in revenue? Are you shrinking in particular costs? What's going on with your business, right? And then finally, business credit history, right? If you're not registered to DUNS, hopefully you can register yourself through Duns and Bradstreet. It allows you to actually keep track of these things and be able to see if you're a good creditor or not, right? It gives you your own individual particular score, but it allows you to actually keep track of these particular items, right? Why is this important? It's very simple, and I put it right there, right? If you don't understand your finances, no one will, right? We all report in the United States in what we consider GAAP, which is General Accounting Acceptable Principles. And if you don't report under those guidelines, no one gets it, right? So when you, and I meet with a lot of business owners, right? Because this is what I do for a living. I will meet business owners and they will say, but you know what? I have an Excel sheet. Then you go, what do you mean you have an Excel sheet? What does that mean, right? And then you will ask, well, what do you have in your Excel sheet? Well, in one column, I show my sales. In the other column, I'll show my expenses. And I kind of go from there, right? Listen, I don't get anything for suggesting this. And, I won't make a buck on this, but trust me, go get QuickBooks, right? It's the least you could do in order to organize your financials. If you don't have that, then essentially you're going to be out of luck. You're going to need solid financials to approach any financial institution in order to receive a loan. Okay. And there's a question in here. I want to ask how to grow your business credit after being registered with DUNS. Great. So you're just because you register with DUNS, it does not mean that right away things are going great, right? So number one, you need to make sure that you start making payments, right? And at least payments on time, because if not, you could be reported to DUNS, right? Number two, you have to make sure that you stay in business for some time, right? And I don't mean 20 years. but you don't do it in a year. You don't do it in 6 months, right? Multiple years allows you to actually build credibility, right? Sorry, so FreshBooks may be more affordable than QuickBooks for a startup bookkeeping program. I will refute that just for a simple concept, right? The issue with other, and once again, I could care less where you go. There's many softwares out there. Um, this is the first time I hear about FreshBooks. I know about QuickBooks, and the reason I recommend QuickBooks is because it has so many integrations with anything that you use that it would be going backwards to try to do something different, right? And there's all kinds of places that will keep your books. I totally agree with you, right? But at the end of it, it's probably the most known place out there to actually do this. And it will cost you as little as $15 a month, all the way to like $39 if you're doing a bigger project or something like that. So it's worth there, right? Okay, let's move it along. Creating a loan or investment proposal. So this is important, right? When you pitch to a bank, you're pitching on a few different things. Number one is, what is your business proposal, right? What is it that you're trying to actually do? Now, don't think of it as I just have the greatest idea of the world and people really going to throw me money this way, right? That is one concept of it. The other concept is, who are you? Who stands behind the proposal? Who is the person that is going to make this a reality? Meaning, what have you done in the past? What makes you prepare to carry on this particular journey, right? Why should we lend you $100,000, $200,000? Because remember, I want to bet on you. I don't want to bet on the idea, because most of my issues is around the person. If the person, I believe in the person that they could do it, that they could really get it accomplished and whatnot, most of my bets are going to be safe, because from there on, no matter what hits you, you're going to be able to, adjust and keep going with the plan. So make sure that you put a lot of information around who you are, right? Not all of it, but a lot of information of who you are, what's your experience, what's your background, what makes you prepared to carry on this plate and whatnot. Second, financial projections, right? If you are going to be losing money for 3, 4 years straight, not a good plan to show to a bank, because guess what? How will they get repaid? They need to understand that. Banks will lend you money at a recovery ratio of 1.25 on a collateral based item. Meaning, if you could repay me back, right, at least 1.25, I'll lend you money on collateral base, right? When it's commercial, right, when it's commercial loans, they want 1.5, means 1.5 times before I can lend you any money. Or else the banks will say, no thanks, right? This is too risky for me, right? Third, who's going to be your list of advisors? You need to make sure that you have some partners in there, right? Because you want to make sure that you have a good amount of support, right? If I don't know this particular thing, how would I actually go about solving it, right? These particular items as we go through it, right? And then, what is the intent with the money? What would I do if I don't have a good intent with the money? So, for example, what people hate to see most of the times is, oh, I'm just going to go invest on infrastructure and people. What is that? Right? And if it's okay if you're going to put people, but then what is the ROI on people? ROI stands for return on the investment. What would I get back? I need to be able to have tangibles here, right? And if I don't, then I will be a little bit confused. Of course, you have the market opportunity. Market opportunity really just represents how big your market is. If you, for example, want to go into the particular clippers and paper industry, how big is that? How big is the industry? Because if you're not showing billions of dollars in opportunity, I wouldn't be so enticing to actually put any money behind you. So you have to make sure that there's a good amount of money in there. Okay. All right, common challenges and terms, right? And we all go through this, and it just happens, right? Poor credit, incomplete paperwork, misunderstanding of loan terms, APR, business interest rates, right? And collateral requirements. Here's a quote tip: always read terms and conditions carefully. Hidden fees matter, right? So I see this all the time when I'm looking at clients' decks or term sheets, and they will say, "Hey, we're going to lend you $100,000, right? And we're going to lend to you at 8%." And you'll get excited, and you said, "This is great. This is a great loan," right? And then all of a sudden it says, "What? You have 5 points as an origination fee," right? And most of us don't understand what those 5 points are. But we should, because 5 points is 5% on the entire loan. So if you're getting $100,000, right, at 8%, the first year you're going to pay it at 13%. And what lenders will tell you, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to put it all into the plan. So it's not going to be that bad," right? So when you look at that, it's going to create an issue, because essentially you're not taking in consideration the cost of capital. And the cost of capital is expensive. Don't think because you're borrowing money that nobody pays for it. Someone pays for it, and you need to start putting that into your particular financial projections as well. Okay. The second one is incomplete paperwork, right? This is the toughest one for all of us. And I get it, right? Because this is all verbiage and stuff that we don't understand and that we're not used to it. And it's okay, right? That's the whole point. They start asking us for a personal financial statement. When was the last time any of us here filled out a personal financial statement? We need to keep one in hand and update it frequently. That way, if we need to visit a bank, then we could go get money from them. But we need to have personal financial statement that works, right? You also need to understand, right, what is a UCC filing? Meaning, if they give you money, they're going to collateralize against a particular receivables, your business or real estate, and they're going to make sure that they become first in the event that something goes wrong. They're going to come knocking on your door for that money, and they'll have first dips on that money, right? But if we never knew that, then we have no understanding of how that goes. What about personal guarantors? All SBA loans have a personal guarantor, right? We all sign personal guarantors like it's nothing. But eventually, you need to start taking consideration that a personal guarantor means that you are on the hook for this personally. And that what you chose as a distinction from an LLC or an ING, it's irrelevant because you are on the hook. And you're saying, "I want to make sure that I'm responsible for this money in the event my business can't pay you." That could be an issue, right? There's a joke between attorneys, and they says, "You know who signs a personal guarantor? Fools." So make sure that you keep an eye on that. All right, financial best practices, right? In order for you to start keeping track of these things, the reason I put this here is because although when we're looking for a loan, and sometimes it's because we burned through our cash or whatever the case may be, I want to make sure that I tell you that you run out of money a long time ago. You don't run out of money this week. You've been running out of money for a long time. So make sure that you put cadences and financial practices that will be working for you. So the first one is track cash flow weekly. You want to understand what your cash flow is. Now, cash flow is not the same as looking at your bank account and understanding that today you have $10,000. That is not the same, right? That is your cash balance. Your cash flow, it's a lot different than that. Now, if I have contracts, right, and if you don't make money every day, meaning you're not in the restaurant business or something that gives you money right away, I think the best suggestion is that you do cash flow modeling, right? Or 13-week cash flow analysis. That way you know what you're going to have for the next 13 weeks going forward in regards to cash. You're able to see who's going to pay you. You're able to see who you're going to pay, and you're able to see how does that going to impact you for the next 13 weeks. Roughly every single week, you're going to have an idea, right? Start building credit lines. So when you start going into supply houses, right, this helps. And I know there was another question here earlier about the DUNS, right? This also helps. Build credit lines in your supply houses if you're in the trades. build credit lines with particular vendors, right? Start making payments on time. If you have your phone bill, electricity, internet bill, all these different things, that's what allows you to actually have credit. If you don't pay those on time, eventually they start reporting you, and then that's why you can't get access to more credit, right? And then here is understanding your burn rate. That's the most important one for me. How much money do you burn each particular month? Or in other words, operating expenses, OPEX, right? Some of us do not understand that nine. And sometimes it's just payroll. It's the one that we get, but we have payroll, we have insurances, we have rent or mortgage, and then we also are going to have cost of goods sold, materials that we need to buy for operation to be there. That's expensive. So we need to understand how much money we need every single month. So when you look at your bank account and you say, well, I have $100,000, but it keeps you, you need $90,000 to run the business, you don't have $100,000. You have $10,000 of liquidity. The rest needs to stay in the business, because if you take that money away, you're going to be putting money back in fairly quickly or looking for a loan. Before I get to a Q&A, right? Let me just stop this here. Now you should be able to see only people. Before I get to the Q&A, I want to make sure that you understand one last point around the financials, right? And around the financials, one of the biggest things that I will tell you is if you don't have proper financials, it's like driving a car without a dashboard, right? You have no idea how fast you're going. You have no idea when you're going to run out of money or when are you going to really be in a really hot mess. So it is mega important that you understand financials on a month-to-month basis, right? I don't suggest that you do financials every week. I don't suggest that you do financials every quarter, but you should have financial acumen and have financial reporting that gets given to you, or you could do it yourself at least once a month. And then you should have an executive meeting. And that executive meeting would allow you to actually tell you what you spend money on, what do you need to make reductions on, what you need to improve. If you don't do that, essentially you're going to keep running your business and you're not going to find out where the issues are for a very long time. Pay attention to the important items, okay? With that being said, I'll open up the floor for as many questions as you guys would want. Don't be shy.
I have a question. And this is more towards grants. I am trying to understand if there are like any available grants out there for a for-profit business. I don't have a nonprofit. I am a general contractor. I have a business for about 2 years, and I am trying to get it to grow, but I know that I need more manpower. Because I still have a day job. So I'm trying to split myself in a million pieces, and it's not enough to be able to get out there to actually have the traction that I need to have so that I can eventually leave my day job.
Yeah. Okay. Yes and no. Which one would you like? The yes or the no?
Both.
Okay. So yes, there are grants out there, right? But not in the way that you think that they're going to be. So in other words, there is no grants that I know of, especially in the trades, where they're going to say, "Here's $50,000. Good luck with your business." They're not being put out there as quickly as they are. But here's what is happening, right? So for example, if you become a partner, and this is where the strategies come in, and I'm sorry that we just cover a piece of it, but this is where I will give you a part of the strategy because this is where I really do most of my work, right? What most people fall short in the trades, right? We have something called register apprentice, right? And through career development agencies, in my state, they're considered mass hire or so, but like employment agencies, they have funding to give you apprentices for free, right? So you would get free apprentices for a couple of months or 3 months or whatever the case may be, They pay for their time. You don't pay for their time, right? That is 3 months of a couple of guys. That's extra set of hands for free. Now, you might not look that as a grant, but in my world, right, that is a grant. Call it 12, $18,000 funds. That's a lot of money, right? Yeah, the program is it's all around the United States, right? So you should be able to see that. Second, there's other programs called Workforce Development Training Fund, right? That is everywhere in the United States. Your state has it as well, right? Where you could train your employees, right, in order to get a specialized training or whatever the case may be, and it's completely free, right? If you want to enter that, it allows you to get free support, right? Because training costs money. That's another grant. I also think in construction, there's a lot of grants for clean energy. So if you're going to do something to your house in regards to saying, you know what, I want to change your boiler, I want to change whatever the case may be, you could get money, right? And give these things, these counts for your customers that are considered grants. Now, remember, when you take away the price from the transaction to any particular customer, the answer becomes a lot easier. Because if I'm able to say, hey, Angela, I'm gonna fix your boiler, I'm gonna put a brand new roof, I'm gonna do all your particular things, and it's free. Would you like me to do this? Why not?
Absolutely.
Right? Why not? So that allows you to get money. Now you would understand the process of actually kind of penetrate the reimbursement and get money directly from the state or for any particular agencies that is doing this. That's a grant. That allows you to penetrate those things, right? I also know that there's grants for equipment. I also know that there's grants for tools, right? But once again, there's no grants that I know that are going to be directly for operational or purpose like that. Are there any grants for IT consultant? Yes. However, IT consultant, if you're not thinking of cybersecurity, you're in for a surprise. So start including cybersecurity in your practice, even if it's just the bit or two, but it's something that you must look at. And there's also a lot of grants in the federal government for IT world, right? I have a nonprofit. I have a grant today. We got a grant for $200,000 to be able to showcase what a an agreement would be for cybersecurity in a space of creating an internship program, right? So they pay us $200,000 to do research about this. There's a lot of grants around that. For-profit business do apply for federal and state grants, right? That does happen, but you have to be careful because they're not the same as a regular contract. There's ways that these things actually get done. Okay. Okay. Other questions?
I just wanted to make a comment for those asking how to build credit. When I started my company 2 years ago, I went and got the free Chase Freedom for Business. There's no monthly fees for that one. And I mean, it is based on your personal credit. So my personal credit is pretty good. So I had no issues. So that's an option. And then I also got the, I think it's called American Express Blue Card.
Yeah.
It's also free and there are no fees for it. And I was able to get those too. So I think that those are a great option.
Correct. Capital One, really good for first starters. Again, everything's usually connected to your credit. Second, American Express is really good. I use the Platinum card, not because I'm bougie or fancy. It's just because, you know what, I like my points and I spend enough money on it that I want to make sure that I get it back. So even though there is a membership fee tied to the card, I get that money back 10 times over with the points that I get.
I have a question. Isn't it true that when you're applying for a grant, you have to already be in business and making money?
Not quite, not all the time. Not all the time. So that's why, you know, and I mentioned here the resource about CDFIs who are a little bit more likely to do something with you. And then also, if you're applying for a grant, sometimes the grant is for you to have an intent to do something. and you're funding these, you need those resources in order for you to actually go and execute these projects, right? So that allows you to actually go through that, right? So there was another question here, and it says about I'm seeking information to connect with labor providers to collaborate on projects between 250 and 750,000, right? So I'm sure the state has a list of providers that allows you to know, right, by NAICS codes, who they are and what they do. And also, in addition to that, the revenue of what they do. But what I would tell you is that there's a lot of people here that provide good services and good work, right? You start with organizations like the NBDA who provide this information as well and could support you in finding these valuable partners. The great thing is that the NBDA already vet them. They already know exactly how much revenue they do. They know exactly how much work they do, and they've been doing it for quite some time. So I will start with the NBDA in order to understand those particular partners that you want to be looking at. But also, guys, this is, today's 2025, social media, it's amazing, right? But this is not a WhatsApp message or a Facebook post. This is a LinkedIn message, and you'll see who's serious, because whoever's serious is going to actually respond to that publication and said, yeah, we are a contractor of choice. We are actually doing great work, and this is our list of references, and here's who you are, right? But it also tells you if you want to enter into that space, you have to actually also play the part and be in that particular space. There was another question on how do banks look at home-based businesses or mobile businesses? They look at P&Ls. They look at revenue. They look at expenses, right? Will they ding you because you're at home, right? Oh, maybe, but reality is if you're at home and you're making great money, they don't care, right? They want to make sure that your books are part. So I wouldn't look at that as an issue. Are there resources that help write a business plan? Ton of them, right? Again, NBDA, one of them, right? It could be a great resource to help write a business plan. Second, there's SCORE, right? You can also go to SCORE and they'll help you write a business plan directly through them, right? Organizations like mine, there's all sorts of things. There's also templates. But what I will tell you is do not hire someone to write a business plan and let them do all the work. That's a waste of resources. You need to understand if this business is going to work on paper. If the business doesn't work on paper, why would you start it? Don't tweak it. Don't lie to yourself, right? There's a reason why business plans are mandatory. They want you to spend the time and they want you to go through all the kinks and whatnot before you actually go and deploy it. Most of us do the complete opposite. We start the business and then we go, oh crap, this didn't work. I never knew expenses were so high. Guess what? Too late. As they say, you're already pregnant. Once you're pregnant, you got to make sure you pull through, right? So think about that, right? We're a 14-year-old consulting firm. We went to leverage that. We were looking at small banks in my area. There are any small banks that you recommend? Okay, what type of consulting firm? If you help me identify that, because that makes a difference. Yeah, hello, Alice, and hello, Skip are great. But what I will tell you is, to this day, I haven't met anybody that's gotten a hello, Alice grant.
Can you hear
If
me
you
now?
meet them, please let me know.
Hey, can you hear me now? Can we go back to the 14-year-old question?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you so much. We're a professional services firm, and we do federal, state, local government, and obviously private sector as well. Our professional services are primarily strategic advisory, management consulting, people and organizational performance, so training, design, and delivery,
Mhm.
and then communication. So a lot of the soft skills type professional services.
Yeah.
We have some digital products, but nothing that's tangible.
Okay. Any state or government contracts?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. And have you been able to leverage that through Dev?
Through Dev?
Yeah, no, through that. Like if you when you went to the bank and you asked them for a loan, what was
No,
their
no,
answer?
we've never had a bank loan.
Okay, so
And
it's
so
the
I'm
same
saying,
same as us, right? We're in the same space. If you're able to showcase the contracts, they'll be able to give you some funding around it as long as you have receivables that are aging past X amount of days. Nothing over 90 days they'll take, right?
Mhm.
But anything 90 or under, they will take, and they'll give you about 70, 80% based on that. So for example, if you have $100,000 that's not been paid to you as of today, right, they will take that and they'll give you $80,000 in a line of credit, right, which is great. And are you a women-owned business?
Yes.
Right.
And
So women-owned business. Go
we're
ahead.
certified. We're WASB certified.
Awesome. So women-owned business, there's a program today through the SBA that you're able to obtain $50,000 in line of credit and $50,000 as a loan through the SBA, right? And usually your bank will be able to actually get through there. Now remember, there's friendlier banks than others. So you want to try, who do you bank with today?
We're with Wells Fargo.
You might want to
And that was my
change.
question really about which banks, because I do want to go to some of the smaller banks.
Yeah, you
And
got to
I
go to
don't know what
smaller
that
banks.
criteria should be.
Listen, what I will ask, if I was to visit any bank today, right? Can you tell me what is the programs that today you have for MWBE business owners? And they'll
Okay.
tell you because they
Okay.
gotten so good at this space that they have a set aside program just for us, right?
Okay.
And it allows us to actually start getting funding a lot faster and a lot quicker, which is awesome. And there's always banks that have this sort of program, right? But Wells Fargo, nothing bad about them. I'm not saying they're a bad bank. They're just big bank. And
Oh,
also
yeah.
Wells Fargo are known for collateralized lending, right?
Mhm.
And I know this because I had loans with them when I was in transportation. I had $14 million in the balance sheet with them. They love me, but I didn't love them back. But that was it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. No, I definitely would not be asking them for a loan. I want to go with a smaller bank for that purpose, but I didn't know, I wasn't sure about the criteria. So when I start to shop for banks, but I like the point about starting with the SBA programs and then also asking the banks about which programs they have. Because I did do some research and there are a lot of banks in, I saw a lot of banks in North Carolina that I never heard of before
Yeah.
that align with specific programs. So this is very helpful.
Yeah. So there's two questions here that I want to make sure I answer. One is when you go to the bank, make sure you ask them what programs do they have for MBWBE business owners, right? So minority, women owned, whatever it is. Disadvantage just basically said, if do you have a program for disadvantaged owned businesses, right? And they'll tell you what they have. Second, you're talking about hub certification. Will it help you get your business get approved for certain SBA funding? It doesn't. So what happens is with the certification, it does not make you a priority. What it does do sometimes for some banks that have these programs is that it will qualify you for reduced cost in processing fees. So for example, there's banks that will have this sort of program and they will say, well, if you're a women-owned business, if you're a Black-owned business, Latino-owned business, gay-owned business, whatever the case may be, the classification you have, we will waive the destination fee. And that destination fee might be 2 points or 1 point or whatever the case may be, right? That allows you to make an argument. Also, if they have like 3 points for destination, which is just a fancy word saying this is how they charge you to get the money to you, you ask them, says, hey, listen, I'm a small business. Would you help me with this? I can't afford this, right? And they'll usually will have some way to track that down. Yeah, and then once again, I don't mean anything bad around Hello Alice or anything. I just haven't met anybody that has been actually a grantee of them when it comes to a grant. They publish a lot of information. You see Foot Locker, you see Kevin's Heart, you see all these different grants. Yet to this day, I haven't met someone that goes, "Oh yeah, I got funded this amount of money," right? From there. All right, I'll take the last question, but I think that was pretty much it.
I would like to make a comment. I have Navy Federal, and I think Navy Federal is pretty good at loaning money. So that might be an option for some.
Yeah. All right. There's something here.
I agree with that. I have Navy Federal as well, and they help me personally a whole lot. I haven't tapped into them business because they're very strategic and very they look at every angle. But yes, Navy Federal Credit Union is very awesome. I just want to concur to that.
Credit unions are great. They're awesome to work with, right? I love doing stuff with credit unions. I love doing stuff like if you're in like in these small towns, so you want to go check out and you say, okay, who's the bank bigger? Like local banks, awesome to deal with, right? But when you get to your Bank of Americas and Wells Fargo, a little bit tougher. There was two comments here around the main targets for Donald Trump and the DEI stuff. Listen, I can't comment on these items, but what I will tell you is take advantage as they're available, right? I don't know if they're going to disappear tomorrow. What I would do is I will apply today, right? And then you try and see what's going to happen. CDFIs have been here forever, right? And CDFIs do really good work as well. Try, I don't know, right? And eventually you're going to figure it out. The intent of today's message, it's not to say you need to go to a CDF5, you need to understand they exist. You need to understand they are out there. And there are different particular things that you could do. Make sure you take advantage. Okay. Well, with that being said, it's 11 o'clock. I'll let you guys have the rest of the day back. And thank you all for being here today. I'll see you in the further sessions, and happy to put my information here if whoever needs it. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today. Yes. And thank you. A special thank you to Dr. Jose Perez of Rhodes Consulting Group for sharing such valuable insights and practical strategies to help your business better understand and prepare for funding opportunities.